Hey Becca, I've looked over your lesson plans and have some feedback for you. So in general, these seem really nicely done, well organized. I think you have a good mix, so I want you to continue to incorporate this mix of you talking and the students talking, and then examples of what you mean. And then, you kind of go back to that three-step thing. You talk, the students talk, examples of what you mean. And I really like that kind of a fluency to the classroom. I think it helps to keep kids engaged so they're not always listening or always being asked to talk, but they get to listen, talk, experience. And so I'll show you some of those sequences that I particularly like that I want you to continue, okay? Right here, your essential questions for the global are very interesting. I think nicely written, well done, but I haven't seen them really be incorporated necessarily in your lesson plan, and I think that's something that you could work towards. It's a good essential question. It would help get some buy-in from the students as to why they're doing what they're doing instead of just writing a story because Miss Smith told us to write a story. Which is fine for kids who are good at the game of school and who want to do well. And that can create a real power struggle for some of those kids who are a little bit more reluctant. So consider incorporating this global essential question into your actual lesson plan. I'll show you where I think that might work. Okay. So here, all right, good formative and summative assessment. I think it's aligned nicely with your evidence outcomes. And I like the fact that you're incorporating the hook for this activity with the literature that you just finished reading, hey? Because obviously you just finished reading someone's story. Okay, so good, you got class started by getting student voices in the classroom, and that's good. And then you go through these different chronologies. So you expect the students to be taking notes, and you talk about foreshadowing. You ask them what it is, and you show them an example. You move through and do a good job with flashback and in medias res also, and starting in the end. The one thing that's missing from these is sort of a why question, okay? At the end of this lesson plan, you ask students to walk around the classroom and high-five someone and pause when they high-five and tell them what chronology they're thinking about. But I don't know why I would use these different chronologies. I just know that they exist out there and have seen an example of them. But you have asked the students to hopscotch from a basic level of knowledge all the way into application. And that's tricky, okay? And that can happen. You can insert that in a few ways. Inside of each one of these pieces where you're talking to them, you can ask them to themselves think about why. Why would I start a movie in the middle, where Kuzco, goes all the way back to childhood and then recent past and then the beginning of the movie and then moves past that? Why would an author make that kind of a choice? What does it do to your viewing experience? What does it do, for the connection between the author and the reader, etc.? And so you've got to have some of those conversations. Even if you don't provide the answers, you have to be peppering the students with some of those questions so that at the end of class, when they walk around and tell each other which one they're thinking, it's not just, oh, I think I'm going to do this one. It's, I think I'm going to do this one, and let me tell you why I think it would be a good fit. That's the kind of piece that we want to always be pushing our students towards. What are you doing? Why are you doing it? Okay? So let's look at your second lesson plan. So we're going to look at part 1, planning day 2. Oops, sorry, forgot to rewind here. Okay? All right, so again, I think that you have chosen a good evidence outcome. Oh, my little box won't expand. Let's see. Here we go. I think you've chosen a good evidence outcome, but again, you have an essential question that I haven't seen you work into the lesson plan itself, and I think it could be a real benefit to you to work that into there, okay? It helps give some purpose and some meaning. Second, you're asking the kids, what's your story? I think that this is actually a really good question. It drives purpose. it gets at purpose. Why is it that you're going to bother to tell this? Why choose this story instead of that story? I think it drives purpose so well that, as a matter of fact, I kind of wonder what it would look like if you flip-flopped your planning day 1 and your planning day 2 lesson plans, so that you really started with this question, like, what story is important enough to you to bother to tell well? And then once they get that idea in mind, that story in mind, they've got a purpose for it, then you can talk to them about structure because they've got some kind of an idea. So you might want to play with that a little bit, flip-flopping those two. Again, I like the fact that you've tied in this lesson plan to the piece of literature you're just reading, because of course literature is, telling someone's story. And so I think that's really good. You walk them through the basic outline of a story: protagonist, antagonist, and goal. And I think this is a good point for you to do that too. I don't think that you would lose anything by doing this, by swapping this one and your structure lesson plan either. I think this is well done. I like the fact that you're having them put their ideas on note cards as well, because the physical manipulation can really help inside of something as abstract as writing is. Okay, so here's your third lesson plan, or the, part 2, the drafting. And in this lesson plan, I'm going to press you because I don't feel like you're doing writing instruction in this one that would really help your students. Let me show you where I think you could integrate that, okay? So again, you have the students working with their note cards and chronology of events. And you say something interesting to them, but you don't stay there long enough to let it sink in. You say, we discussed why people tell stories, the different kind of stories, and why stories are important. Maybe you imagine that at the beginning of your lesson plan on The Outsiders, but I didn't see that anywhere in these lesson plans here. So I don't think that you have discussed why people tell stories. That's that essential question. And then you simply say to students, now you have the opportunity to write your own. I want you to keep in mind that this is a safe place. At the same time, I want you all to take a bit of a risk. Try something new. Your story matters and the world is ready to hear it. And then you move on, okay? Simply saying that to someone isn't going to get that idea through to their head. You have to let them play with that idea and work with that idea a little bit so that they can come to that conclusion on their own. Some kids in the classroom will just plain believe that you said that, and some kids in the classroom, simply because you said it and you're the teacher, are never going to believe you. So I want you to think about staying with this idea and expanding upon it, okay? And I think it works nicely with this idea up here, and so I think that you can get that piece worked in at the beginning of the unit, all right? Now, over here, you call this independent practice, but what you've done is tell the kids that they should have no more than 5 main events to their story. I don't know why you chose 5, and frankly, neither do the students. It seems, well, I think you've probably thought it through. To the students, it's going to seem very arbitrary. Why 5 events? What kind of events? What if I have 10 events and they're all important? Because students are thinking about moving along plot. So if you want to say something like your story can have no more than 5 events, you need to talk to them about the criteria for your decision, so that what students can do is not just write what you tell them to write, but that they could have some criteria for making some of their own decisions, so that when they move forward and write on their own, they know what they're doing and they know why they're doing it. Okay, that's the difference between telling students something and teaching them something, okay? Then you simply say that you're gonna walk around as the students work, check in on them, and anticipate if they may have too many events or be struggling to have enough. And encourage them to make sure that their stories make sense, flow and make sense, okay? These are 2 very, very abstract ideas that you cannot just throw out at kids. This is that piece we've been talking about. If you want to say something abstract, as is often the case in language arts and especially writing, you must ground it in the concrete. If you want to tell students that their stories need to flow and make sense, You need to give them direct instruction and concrete ways in which to do that, okay? Especially because, think of it, you're having them write outside of a typical chronological order, and you haven't justified for them why, and you haven't asked them to, you haven't talked to them about which stories fit in which chronologies best. And so students are either going to feel like they're strong writers and they know what you mean by flow, or they're not going to feel like strong writers and they have no idea what you mean. This is a real missed opportunity in this lesson plan where you could be doing some independent instruction, some direct instruction on transitions and direct instruction on how to know what makes sense, okay? This lesson plan, this particular one here, part 2, drafting, needs some heavy overhauling because you actually haven't done any direct instruction in here. It's really just kind of activities organization. Okay, so here's your last lesson plan in the sequence. I did see your revision checklist handout too, okay? So in this one, you want the kids working on transition words, phrases, and clauses. And so I was hoping to see the grammar mini lesson that we required in here, but I didn't see it, okay? So you're going to need to revise specifically for that. Hold on one sec. Here we go. Okay, so you randomly assign them to partners. And I want you to think about the fact that we, you know, in class one day when we had you guys do some writing and we were ready to trade papers, you were the only person in class who said you were kind of excited about that. Everyone else got frustrated, irritated, or worried about that. So I want you to use Doug Lemov's notion of double planning a lot. You know, a lot of the students in your classroom aren't necessarily going to feel comfortable doing this. And when you force it upon them with a stranger, what kind of mutiny are you inviting into your classroom, okay? Think about how that would, how that would fly with some of, especially your more reticent writers, which you're going to have more reticent than willing, okay? Now, you talk about the importance of transitional words and phrases, and you simply write, discuss the examples given from the OWL handout. This lesson should be mostly review for the students. The focus is not on the phrases themselves, so don't dive too far into that context, all right? As a matter of fact, I wanted you to dive into that context because you were required to do a grammar mini lesson, and putting it in a revision stage is a good place to put it. Secondly, discussion is a teaching strategy, not a lesson plan. If you want to write that you need to discuss examples from the OWL handout, you need to script out for me how you're going to say and what you're going to say to them. So on to this sentence here, when you say the main goal for the mini lesson is to emphasize the need for transitional phrases when moving around in time and narratives. That is a revision technique that they need to pay attention to, but again, I need to see the direct instruction specifically involved with that, okay? So you give them a revision checklist right here, but and you tell them to mark simple editing, but don't fix them. But again, we haven't done any mini lessons on what those simple editing mistakes are or how to watch for them. And here, then you have them edit and revise their partner's paper. But again, on that editing checklist, which is right here, you actually don't have anything, how do I say, this is the first time that you've introduced this checklist to them, and so bringing it up in a revision phase can be a little bit scary because, for instance, things like this. Do you describe the setting, the where, and the when? A student may or may not have done that. They may or may not have paid good attention to that, and they may or may not have done that well, because here we are in the revision lesson plan, the very final lesson plan of the unit, and it's the first time they're hearing, oh, the description of the setting is important, right? You did discuss obstacles, but you didn't discuss, sorry about that, the need for any sensory language. And so again, here we are in the final part, and you're going to be, double plan, put yourself in your student's shoes. Okay, they're going to be sideswiped by something like this. Describe your thoughts about the situation and I think probably you mean, did you describe the character's thoughts about the situation? They may or may not have done that. I think, Becca, one of the big challenges for you, and I haven't been working with you that long, but we've got about a semester under our belt. You're a really strong student. You're really motivated and dedicated, and you seem very comfortable with the English language arts world, reading and writing. I need you to start thinking about the kiddos who aren't going to feel that way, and start to think about what the English language arts world looks like to them, because they're going to see, this as a side swipe. I didn't know that. I didn't know she wanted me to do that. She didn't tell me to do that. And it's going to create a situation where the kiddos feel like you are the holder of some secret information that some other kids knew and they didn't know, and it's going to really kind of shut them down a little bit. Okay, so think about those things when you're working on revisions for this. Okay, thanks.